Oh,
It's getting better, eh? Sounds good from your perspective.
okay, everyone. Welcome to our Committee of the Whole meeting for November 20th. I call this meeting to order at 6 p.m. I'm going to be the deputy mayor for the next few meetings, so back at it tonight. To begin, we will have an adoption of the agenda with one addition, personnel under 6C, an in-camera item. It follows with the FOIP 24.1D section. Would someone like to move that the agenda be approved? Alex? Reed? Councillor Reed? Thank you. Any discussion? No. All in favor? Carried. And next we will look at the minutes of the previous meeting. If we could have a motion to accept those from November 6th, 2023. Councillor Wilson.
I'll move the November 6th minutes.
Okay, all in favor? Carried. So we'll get right, we have no delegations tonight, so we'll get right into the business. We're getting an update on the Syphon project from Mr. Derricott, who's coming up to the podium. Take it away, Mr. Derricott.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor Flowers. Council, pleased to bring forward an update on the recent water and wastewater infrastructure incident we had in our community. While council and the public who may have seen recent posting on social media, a lot of this information is contained. The primary function of this report is to continue to be as open as we can about both the incident itself and the impacts in our community. So I will be happy to run through some information and then answer questions if there are any from council. As you can see here are a few things that we'll touch on, just a review of the timeline, overview of the communications process, current status. I will introduce, although I think council may have heard us use the language of a ECC task force recovery, which is a post-incident activity, and then on the restarted project. So on October 21st at 6 p.m., the town of Cochrane was made aware that a contractor working on behalf of the town on a town project impacted our water, our wastewater and water pipelines. Initially, we did not know that it was both lines. We thought it was just a wastewater line, and it took a little while for us to identify that it was both water and wastewater pipes that had been impacted. By 8:30, we had activated the Emergency Coordination Center. This allows us to work with external agencies, City of Calgary, Rockview County, Environment Alberta, and Alberta Health Services, and also bring all necessary organizational resources to respond to the incident. The following morning, by 10:45, we had activated level 3 water restrictions as we were losing a significant amount of water. Water restricted later that day to area hotels and vehicle dealerships as we worked to isolate that. Unfortunately, those were not as effective as we had hoped. By October 24th, as we continued to struggle to isolate the water loss, the town of Cochrane declared a state of local emergency. Again, this is a tool municipalities have that allows us to respond with additional expediency to what is an emergent circumstances, in this case significant water loss. There was some road closures later that day that allowed crews to begin working on temporary repairs to the water and wastewater systems that helped us to isolate the leak. By October 26, the water reservoir levels had improved and we were able to lift the state of local emergency. October 29th, active repairs were underway to the water main. There was obviously a lot of information sharing happening through this incident. This is obviously always forefront of these types of events is who has what information when, and as we get that information at the town level, ensuring that the residents are as aware of possible as to potential impacts, and then to share that information. There's 25 media releases issued, between October 21st and the present, 3 press conferences on October 24th, 25th, and 26th respectively. We also made use of the Alberta Emergency Alert System twice, once on the 21st, the initial notification of the incident, and then on the 24th, the state of local emergency. There was significant media interest between the 21st and the 30th. We had a potential news reach overall of 65 million people. This was based on a variety of articles, both regionally and nationally. The single greatest reach was by an article in the Toronto Star on the 27th of October that reached just over 4 million people. There was an article published by CTV News that reached over 1 million people, and then one by the Calgary Herald that reached nearly 1 million people. Just an example of where some of that information was ending up. As well, social media, the town of Cochrane Facebook posts reached 45,000 unique individuals. This is up 90% from the previous week, so you can see how the incident drove a lot of eyeballs to town information, which is excellent. It's part of what we strongly encourage when an event like this is taking place, is that people seek that information from town of Cochrane sources directly, either our website or our social media. Instagram, 62,000 individuals, a significant increase in traffic there, as well as some increase in our YouTube activity, which is where we posted the news conferences as well. Website, you can see here that there was significant views on our website as well. I won't necessarily list all of those pieces that happened there, but this is status as of November 10th, as a little while ago, but that's when the level 3 water restrictions were lifted, as well as regular water service had been restored to all the households, in particular those on Riverside Place, were the sole kind of area of our community that experienced disruption to their water system. There was a number of temporary road closures that were lifted as well, that had allowed for some more repair work to take place on the water system. So on November 10th, we formally deactivated the Emergency Coordination Center, or the ECC. The executive leadership team met with Chief Pauly and Mike Corbin today to discuss the ECC Recovery Task Force. What does that mean? The task force is a group of administration comprising emergency coordination and municipal employees that are focused on stabilizing, revitalizing, and enhancing resilience. So this is 2 things, is what can we learn from this incident, both to prevent this as well as to improve responses to future incidences, as well as there is still a significant after action burden on the organization as we ensure appropriate documentation and work through things like the financial administration that follows through an event like this. And so while the ask in the response of staff was extremely high, it has not completely gone away. It's still taking some administrative time to ensure that we capture all the learnings that we can, and to place our organization and community in the best position moving forward. It's anticipated that the Recovery Task Force will complete their activity by the end of Q1, so you can get an idea of what that kind of timeline looks like. So the project itself, the Riverview Syphon Twinning project, has restarted after some initial review with administration and a consulting engineer and the contractor. It became quite clear that the best way The safest and most cost-effective time to do the project remained now. And so the decision was made to move forward with Urban Systems and Whistle remobilizing equipment and crews. And likely council and residents have seen the site has been active now as that project is proceeding. I'm pleased to say at this point, as originally anticipated, to help us build a more resilient infrastructure for our community there. Residents will continue to see impacts there through the Riverfront Park area, the skate park, and the disc golf course will be impacted as they move forward. The timeline for the project is the directional drilling portion of that is expected to be completed in early 2024. Maintenance of the existing Syphon pipeline will take place in spring of 2024. This is pretty close to the original timeline of the project, and of course there's always the spring remediation of those previously mentioned public areas that needs to take place in the spring, the riverfront parking area, as well as the park space and trails that are impacted in that area. You'll see here a note that there is an investigation of the incident that is occurring concurrently with the project being now in progress. The outcome of this investigation is a part of determining cause and accountability. And while I'm sure there are many in the community who would love a very specific, detailed answer to that, there's a couple of reasons why we can't do that, not the least of which is that there are some legal and insurance-based processes that are underway. What we can say is it's pretty clear that the drilling location was incorrect to start the project. And as to why that happened and the responsibilities and accountabilities associated with that, that's the purpose of the investigation. So there'll be more to come from there. What I will say is we continue to have great cooperation from the three key parties as part of this. The contracts that we sign for these types of projects allow for incidents and the processes that will follow in the event of something not going the way it's supposed to, and so those contracts are being relied on by all parties, and we look forward to a full resolution of that through the investigation, through our various insurance and contractual protections that the town has. With that, I would be happy to do my best to answer any questions. Again, just noting that there are some pieces that I won't be able to speak to in great detail due to the legalities of those processes.
Thank you for your presentation, and Councillor Reid has a question.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I was going to suggest that given that town council has carefully monitored this situation at some points hourly, that maybe the general public doesn't know or necessarily appreciate just the level of commitment from a town staff. You know, the 24/7 kind of shift work that went on, the call center that was set up, which I don't know that you referenced, but I think it's worth speaking to not so much in terms of the volume of calls that came, but the fact that the town was prepared to act in that way in terms of being able to address our citizens' concern. You know, I think council has said it privately, but I think it's worthwhile saying publicly just how grateful council has been for administration and dealing with this crisis, because that's exactly what it was a crisis. And to see how effectively and efficiently the town staff worked in terms of being able to do that is commendable. And I don't know that the public is necessarily aware of that, but I think that this might be the forum and opportunity to be able to speak to that.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Reid, through the chair. I absolutely agree. And just for context, this is certainly the largest mobilization of the Town of Cochrane organization in response to a single event in its history. There was, in the early stages, the first 2 weeks, there was over 3,000 hours of staff time responding to this event. And so an absolute collective and consistent effort, and as you said, for a period of a number of days, actively working on this 24 hours a day. for quite some time. And so I shared this publicly before, happy to do so again. It's as proud as I've ever been of a team of public servants in terms of the commitment and interest in working on behalf of the people in our community. I will just note, you mentioned the call center in terms of the information sharing piece. We certainly worked to prepare for residents to receive and get information as easily as they possibly could. There wasn't a large volume of calls, but I think the opportunity for those who needed to receive or ask questions or gather information was important. And it's a credit again to the work of the team in terms of the amount and the consistency and the quality of information that was shared through the various channels that I think demonstrated that most people felt they had access to the information they needed through the event. So yes, appreciated that, and certainly our team, we have worked hard to make sure the staff know how much their effort was appreciated.
I'm just going to say that as well, thank you for the team as well on behalf of those people that I have contact with. Not only because there was a continuous flow of information, good information, and timely, but their water wasn't disrupted. And for the most part, I think the emergency team made the right decisions in terms of being able to move that agenda forward so that the fewer people were affected as possible. So again, thank you.
Excellent. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Comment just to echo Councillor Reid. From my perspective, I was very impressed with our administrative response. The people in the room here today and those watching, just to thank you for the way it was handled. I thought it was professionally, more than professionally well done, and it really was a situation where I can't imagine how it actually ended up being solved in the end when you have a high pressure pipe that needs to be repaired without turning the water off. I don't know how that process works, but my goodness, just thrilled that we got through it however that happened. My one question that you see predominantly on social media is financial risk to the Cochrane taxpayer from this. What will end up being the consequences of everything? And I know without the investigation complete, perhaps there's limited information you can give us.
Yeah,
Mr. Derrick,
certainly happy to speak to that in a general sense. I'll reiterate first what I said is that we are contractually protected, as well as a variety of insurances. Ours and others of the key proponents of the project are all involved here to ensure that the financial risk to the town is minimized as much as it possibly can be. We feel confident that we are in a positive position with regard to that. I don't think it would be appropriate for me to say more than that at this stage. I will say that as we continue to work through the cost pieces, that we anticipate that the cost is somewhere between $400,000 and $700,000. We're still working to capture that. So it was a significant expenditure of resources that took place. And the town will be using all of those tools that I mentioned to ensure that that liability exists where it belongs, and that it won't have a direct impact to the taxpayer.
Okay, thank you. And you generated one other question there, and that's that we went ahead with the project immediately afterwards. I know that speaks to a few different things, that financial considerations of getting it going again and not having to pay whatever the new ticket would be years down the road. Obviously, the need for this project in the first place, and then also our two partners we were working with, their Urban Systems and Whistle, being extraordinary in their response to the event too. Is there anything else you could add to why we decided to continue immediately on with that? I know it's a council decision as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It became quite clear that that was prudent for a number of reasons. I used language, it was never going to be cheaper or safer to do it. And I think the safety part of that, both in terms of, we certainly knew where the utility lines were now. I don't mean to be glib about that, but that's always a risk when you're doing directional drilling, and so having that visibility has improved the safety of the project. And with the cost escalations we've seen in construction season over construction season, we anticipate that there would have been potential for as much as $1 million of just natural cost escalation. In particular, when you already have a contractor mobilized and on site and ready to do the work, it made the most sense. I also do want to say, while this was an unfortunate incident, there was obviously some errors made. We do have confidence that we have both a great consulting engineer as well as a really strong contractor that has a great reputation for delivering on these types of projects. And so the determination was made to move forward.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you for circling back to council with this update. It answers a lot of questions that we hear in the community, I'm sure plenty, and that's all I have on this topic. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor McFadden.
Yes, thank you very much for the update. I know, well, first I did want to say, thankful, to our staff and the contractors and all the businesses and our residents who stepped up to be part of the solution. In talking about this, I mean, we know how to prepare for floods and deal with floods. We know how to handle, we have an entire fire department to handle fires, but this is a unique type of emergency that you just couldn't prepare for. And I thought the team did a really great job in responding and learning. Every day, the communications strategies improved and adapted. And so, and with every project, I mean, there's a lot of key learnings, but I think the town of Cochrane really responded well and did ourselves proud. And I think certainly we're going to be something to be talked about for a while, but I think we showcased a lot of really great decision making. So thank you to everybody who made that possible. The next piece, of course, and Councillor Wilson highlighted, the biggest question I always got was very blunt. It was like, how much is this costing us? Which you've answered. Who's paying for it? Who's at fault? And it better not be me. And some of them were even more blunt than that. And you've highlighted, of course, that we're going through the investigation and we can't determine that until we finish the investigation. But at this point, how are we looking at, how are the costs being covered right now? What's our strategy? And then what perhaps is the timeline for the investigation and for recovery of those costs? Like, essentially, how is the municipality floating these costs as we work through the solution?
Yes, thank you through the chair, Councillor McFadden. Just as you were in the early parts of your remarks, noting the really strong response both from our own organization. I do just want to reiterate that we did have some great support from some partners, in particular City of Calgary and Alberta Environment and a number of others that were present and supportive and helpful. And it was not only just an exceptional community effort, but really the regional community was incredibly supportive and helped with that response as well. So in terms of the cost, again, I would say that it's too early to determine with great specificity how those things will be handled. What I would say is that even in the event of some of those costs perhaps being found to be uncovered, for example, by the contractor for a variety of reasons, we do have our own insurances in place as well. And so it is our anticipation that some combination of contractual protection and insurances will minimize the direct cost of the taxpayers. And so that I think is the best way to answer that broad question at this point. The timelines are really difficult to identify because we're in the early stages of the investigation and don't know yet exactly what that will reveal. And significant claims through insurance processes can take time as part of that. In the short term, the number I mentioned between $400,000 and $700,000, the town is obviously cash flowing that portion of the response, but it will make up the claim that we will submit to this process to ensure that we recover as much of that as we absolutely can.
And what again, the kind of the blunt question you sometimes hear to that is like, is this why my taxes are going up this year? So
no.
Give us that response. Okay,
yes,
no, that's
no. This is not anticipated at this time to have a direct impact on taxpayers, as in an increase in taxation.
Okay. And I think my final question for now, thank you to everybody who came to the solution. We're going through the investigation and determining responsibilities and liabilities, those type of questions. And then the big question also I'm hearing is, what's the environmental impact of that? And I haven't heard too much of that response. Can you speak to that?
I can, yes. Thank you. It is a really important question. In the very early stages, our very highest priority was to stop the flow into the Bow River of effluent, and we were able to accomplish that in the first 36 6-ish hours. Boy, I set myself up for that one. As part of that, and obviously that's to mitigate the impact to the environment as well. There is, I'm not being a technician in the environmental sense. I probably won't say too much about it other than to say that there is a relatively limited risk for this type of environmental incident. They do happen. Effluent does make its way into places it's not supposed to be, but the risk to humans in terms of interacting with that site is relatively minimal, and the remediation of those spaces is actually quite minimal in terms of what's required by Alberta Environment. I think the most important thing I would say to anyone that is concerned by that is Alberta Environment was notified as immediately as possible and was present and observing and advising through this entire process to ensure that we followed all best practices in regards to both protection of environment, but also preparing ourselves for remediation and activating those sites again.
Okay. And from an environmental standpoint, the site is safe, the riverbanks are safe, we kept people away from those, but we're at a safe point with that, and we've worked with all of the regulators and checkpoints to make sure.
That's right. Any restriction now is more related to the construction activities. It's no longer related to any environmental contamination risk.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the update, and I'm expecting that we're going to get other updates, but are you expecting to update us once a month, or what might be your timeline?
Yeah, thank you. I think we're not likely planning a broad public. This was kind of our introduction of this information to the public. Obviously, there's still a few processes. Council will be kept apprised directly of the implications of the investigation, et cetera, which will likely trigger some conversation publicly. We just don't have a timeline on when that might be.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Not seeing any other lights on. Thank you for this really important update, and I just wanted to say it was a difficult time for all Cochrane residents and a big worry, but we're really grateful that our water stayed intact and we have such great water. So much communication happened, it can never be too much, but I know the mayor led us through, and I just want to thank him and all the staff and all the workers and all the partners and everyone that resolved this so professionally and so well. It is part of our history now, and it's good to see it in the background.
If I may, Deputy Mayor, I have mentioned a number of people, but I also do want to express administratively our appreciation for the business community and residents. We did get great cooperation from our community, and it was impactful in managing this incident. So the community was one of the key elements of, I think, successfully managing a difficult circumstance.
People worked hard to do their part, so thank you. We'll move on then to the next item, which I believe you're also bringing forward.
You're stuck with me for another one, yes?
This will be the expense reimbursement policy, remuneration and expenses.
Yeah, so just before I move any further at all, thank you, Deputy Mayor. The remuneration portion of this policy is not intended to be discussed. That's just the name of the policy, which is why it's up there. This is really focused on the expense portion of the policy, just to add any clarity there. So just a refresher of the background for this, there was a notice of motion brought forward in May to a regular council meeting asking for a review of expense policy and procedures. Administration was instructed to undertake that work, in particular regarding council's travel, training, and expenses. We initially presented to council on the 5th of September to get some broad guiding principles that allowed us to come back and bring back now a draft policy for council's review. I will say this was one of the items that was slated to come forward a little bit sooner. It was disrupted by the incident that we just discussed, but we're pleased now to be bringing this forward to council. So we noted 3 guiding principles that were forefront for administration as we took council's feedback and built the reviewed policy for you: transparency and accountability, stewardship of resources, and adaptability to change. So we wanted to balance all of those 3 principles as best as we could. We felt that that would give council the best tool to do their work on behalf of the community. Some of the general themes that came out from our review of some other policies, as well as council's feedback. More robust, simplified online reporting is, I think, a critical element of this. People can see and access and understand what the work of council looks like and what it costs. To be pretty straightforward, don't be too cheap, but don't be too extravagant. It's about finding a reasonable medium for business expenses incurred while elected officials are working on behalf of their constituents. Training development should be equitable, and each councillor should have the ability to determine how they can best utilize that funding to enhance their ability to perform their duties. We tried to keep it as simple as possible, not prescriptive, but permissive with guidelines. Obviously, we wanted to ensure that there remains a link between the expenditures and council's strategic objectives. We felt that it was good to use benchmarks to guide spending on things like meals and accommodations. At this point, we're recommending the National Joint Council as our reference point. Just for council's recollection, if you are not familiar with the National Joint Council, it is a group that is made up of both elected officials and administrators that review and set regular parameters under which they feel are appropriate expenditures. We also added strengthened language around ensuring that the council as a whole is responsible for approving expenses. The mayor approves council's expenses, and this is clarifying as well that the deputy mayor is responsible for reviewing and approving the mayor's expenses. Some highlights of the policy that you will see in your package there is we're recommending a pretty significant change to how we structure council's development budget. We're recommending that council members would have a $6,500 training and development budget, and the mayor would have a $10,000 training and development budget, and that there would be no separate FCM budget held in a general sense, so that each councillor would be able to make the decision how best to utilize that $6,500 to attend a variety of training and development opportunities. So regular conferences such as Alberta Municipalities or FCM would be at the discretion of each member of council to take from that budget, as well as any other developmental courses that might be desirable. Again, travel and expenses, we're recommending using the National Joint Council as the guideline for expenditures. The language is that accommodation shall not be extravagant nor substandard. Again, we believe that guiding principles are the best way to do this rather than to try and develop prescriptive lists. I will note that there remains an indication that wherever possible, hotel or accommodations linked with conferences that often have favorable rates should be the preferred method of accommodations. Again, the mayor's expenses to be reviewed and approved by the deputy mayor. Online disclosure and reporting. At the heart of this is that council members have some discretion in terms of how they choose to expend those important resources, and that the ultimate accountability will be that these will be posted clearly and accessibly online, where each council member then may or may not be called upon to answer questions about their expenditures of resources there. Also, moving forward from the financial accounting sense, each council member will have an individual GL code. This is a relatively new development, so that as expenses are incurred, they can be appropriately tracked relative to each member of council's expenditures. That will make the disclosure and reporting easier to do, quicker to do, as well as more accurate. Just a note here with I originally had a screenshot from our soon to be revealed new website, but I felt like it was too soon to let that cat out of the bag, unfortunately. But there will be a direct reporting mechanism, both on a general page of council, but also each individual councillor's information page will have a link that will then be able to go directly to their reporting. The idea here being the nature of the expense, as well as the expense itself, will be listed where individuals can see this. It won't look exactly like this. This was just an example here of the type of information that will be placed in there. So now looking for hopefully some final feedback from council tonight that would allow us to bring back a policy that would be approved by council. And the broad questions are: have we hit the mark in terms of building a healthy expenditure policy? And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions and take any feedback.
Okay, thank you for that information. Councillor Wilson, you brought this forward. What would you like to say?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would just give the thumbs up that this hits the mark for me. I do very much appreciate that it's not overly prescriptive. I like the simplicity. The original genesis of the notice of motion was particularly to increase transparency of council expenses for public scrutiny. I think that is what we've achieved here. I like the online reporting piece, which I hope coincides perfectly with the new website. Overhaul slated for end of the month, if I've got the dates right, or soon,
that's
whenever
correct,
that is.
yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. And I like that this gives each council member onus to defend their own spending, which you outlined in the presentation as well, so fantastic. My only question from it is the slide you showed us, which is an example of what it might look like. That's what the public would be able to access, something similar to this on our
Relatively
website?
similar, yeah. It won't be exactly like this. I believe this is our existing disclosure piece, or at least it's a grabbing of existing expenses placed in this format, but time, date, expense, as well as the related activity will all be easily accessible for individuals who wish to review their council's expenses.
Okay, excellent. I've got no criticism. I'm eager to hear what the others have to say around the table, but as far as I can see, this is exactly what I was looking for. Thank you.
Councillor McFadden.
Yes, thank you. I think, and thank you, Councillor Wilson, for bringing this forward. I think, training and the cost to perform your duties is important, but the other piece that's also important is the ability to clearly be transparent in that and demonstrate that. So they go hand in hand, and to keep it as simple as possible, I certainly support that. So it's close to the mark for a couple pieces. One of the thoughts I had, because I think when this was first created, the remuneration and expense may have been tied together because at the time, councils were getting a
Per diem?
well, there wasn't a per diem per se. It was just you had a larger tax-free portion, and so I think it was tied together. I think it might be worth separating the two policies, the remuneration separate from the expense policy.
If I may just say, that is absolutely something that we noted and will be considering moving forward. We didn't quite wrap our heads around that at this point, but likely that is something council will see in the not too distant future.
Okay. Yeah, they're just two separate things. They used to be more closely tied. Training and development. So I really do like this. Like, here's a flat rate. Spend it as you best see fit, and be prepared to, communicate and respond to the community, be accountable to our bosses, which at the end of the day is the members of the public and our electors. So I appreciate that. Just a flat rate piece. When it comes to the training and the development, though, I do find it a little bit too prescriptive. In that the way I'm reading this is that it's just for annual conferences and Alberta Urban Municipality training pieces, the EOEP courses. I think I would prefer that again, just as the budget is more wide open, that be more wide open, because in the past I've taken public engagement courses, I've taken intro to oil and gas courses, I've taken planning level courses, and so I think that should be, again, wide open and at the discretion of the council member to take the courses and then be prepared, or the training, whatever it might be, and then be prepared. So I would like to see that prescription removed from there. Like as an example, I took a MBA level leadership and governance course that I tried to get covered in our current piece, and I've read a whole bunch of papers about our municipality that I wasn't able to fit into the last version of this. So if we could make that less prescriptive and more accountable to the public, I would support that. Of course, having a brief report, and even if in our, so we're saying we have to submit our expenses on a monthly basis, if the reporting could be quarterly, and I really wouldn't even mind if we build in there that, a brief sentence or a paragraph could be added to the public report, if that's a piece, I don't know, that's just brainstorming. I do appreciate this, you know, when traveling to conferences, we should try to reduce our costs as much as possible. I don't want to necessarily be too prescriptive in saying to stay at designated conference hotels, because often you can get better rates at Airbnbs or bed and breakfasts, or again, if you just leave that amount to the counselor to sometimes sort, I think we might be able to get better value instead of always staying at hotels. I do have some colleagues that are a little bit more creative in their accommodations, and they manage to save their fees quite well.
Sorry, I don't know if you have more. I'm happy to comment on a few of those pieces.
Sure.
If that's
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
thank you.
I'm just gonna circle to my last
Certainly, the first one on the training development is absolutely intended to be permissive, not prescriptive, and so we can just review the language to see how we do there. The idea is really just drawing that the broad parameter that we believe is appropriate is that the training and development needs to be directly related to the role of an elected official. I feel that's very broad. There's lots and lots of training and development that can likely fit into that space. And that ultimately the accountability then does fall on the counselor in terms of whether or not that is, at the end of the day, appropriate. So we'll take another look at that language, but that is certainly the intent. Similarly, on the accommodations piece, we want to be more flexible than prescriptive, just noting that is usually the best hotel accommodations are in conjunction with that. But we actually did add as well the opportunity for private accommodations to be considered, as in if you have a friend, family member, et cetera, that you can choose to stay with and you choose to do that it gives that opportunity, because that can reduce costs as well. So I think in line with what you're suggesting there is the intent, and we'll again review the language piece just to make sure that that's explicit.
That would be, no, and I appreciate the feedback on those. The other, is this also meant to, because we often get invites to a lot of, community events, attend this fundraising dinner or dueling pianos or whichever organizations. So the intent of this is to be able to use these funds to participate in those activities?
Thank you. We did maintain a small list of prohibited activities. We tried to, again, simplify that as much as possible. One of the things that did remain on that list were fundraising events that we believe that it is most appropriate that council members, should they choose to support a local organization or that type of thing, that they do so personally rather than through their elected official. Also, typically, if an elected official is invited in a formal role, as in to speak or those types of things, that there's usually not a cost associated with that, as in their tickets are covered by the event. So that's the status of that at this point.
Okay. And then, the final piece is the transferability. I know a number of my colleagues around the region and beyond allow for budgets to be transferred. So if somebody has time or the willingness to take on extra training and somebody's not using up their training budget, that it could be transferred. Could we look at something like that? Or thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you. It's the policy doesn't currently contemplate that. I think that would just have to be at the discretion of council or direction from council if they want to pursue that. I really don't have any strong feelings on that, other than I do think that there would just have to be clear parameters on how, under what circumstances, and what happens in those regards as part of that. So, but I think that's more for your council colleagues to comment on than myself.
Sure, no, and I appreciate that. And that pretty much does wrap it up. Like, at the end of the day, I really do feel that continued training and development, conference attendance, representation of the municipality at different events is an important part of the role. And I know sometimes it can be viewed as a perk, but it is an important part of the role to stay up to date and to build those networks, understand and to represent. And I do take it seriously, so I am glad that we're able to update and review this. So thank you for the good work, and those are my thoughts to date.
Yeah, if I just may add to your comments, we administratively completely endorse the idea that well-educated and well-trained elected officials are the best kind of elected officials for residents. The issues that our growing community Yeah, it's what's that? Well, it doesn't hurt our feelings at all. Yeah, no, I certainly won't shy away from that. But the complexity of the issues that a community like Cochrane are facing are continually increasing and changing and evolving, and the ability of elected officials to understand and have the best possible framework for decision making is, I think, critical.
Great, thank you. Mayor Janone.
Yeah, thank you. Pretty much a thumbs up from my perspective as well. I think we've hit the mark here. Colleagues have outlined most of what my thoughts were. The only suggestion I would have is section 5.4. It is, I prefer the language as it was previously, and it was kind of surprised me that actually we're not following our current policy now, that council members are required to provide a brief report of significant learnings during council reports in the regular council meeting after taking part in a developmental activity. I think it's only prudent in the, we're one of the two pillars that you highlighted in accountability and transparency. I don't see it's a big ask for council members to provide a brief update to their colleagues or the community on what conference it was or what course you took, to come back in a council report and say, what, like it says previously, provide a brief report of significant learnings. So that would be the only suggested edit for me. It's a minor one, but I don't think it's a difficult one for us to contemplate. I'd be curious what my colleagues thought about that. Around the transfer of funds between colleagues, I understand the need or the intent there maybe, but I don't understand, or I can't wrap my head around how we would really facilitate that. So if there's something that we need, I would suggest maybe we just increase the budget to allow for that, and then if you didn't partake, then you wouldn't use those funds. But to transfer between colleagues, it's like, so if I change my mind 3/4 of the way through the year and I've transferred you my credits, and I want to go back and take a course, then maybe I'm limited. So I don't know how we would really facilitate that. Is a question I would have. But otherwise, I'd say let's make the each of the accounts large enough for people to be able to do the things they want to do, and then at the end of the day, you're accountable to the public on what you chose to expend your funds on. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, if I may, just on the first part of that, the C4 on the reporting requirement. So one of the reasons we made the adjustment is because it's not something that has been the practice of the municipality at this stage. And I can think about a number of training pieces where, quite frankly, there's not a lot of direct value in bringing back reports. For example, something like subdivision and development appeal board training, where there might not be a whole lot of value in coming back and making a report. So it was just to try and create some discretion around that, rather than to create a kind of a rote piece coming through. So I'm just sharing with you the perspective of administration on that. Where we wanted to leave discretion was not only to the individual member of council, but also that any other member of council could request a report as well, as in to say, oh, Councillor Wilson, you attended X conference last month. I'd love to hear what your key takeaways. That could also allow, I guess, a form of accountability as well, that council could use as part of their tool. And obviously leaving the opportunity for any council member at any time to share what they would feel would be most relevant. So again, just sharing administration's perspective on why we took the direction that we did.
Yep, and thank you for the explanation. I guess as a heads up to my colleagues, then I will just ask that every single time.
Yeah, and again, this is a draft. It is certainly at the discretion of council that remains as it is. I just wanted council to have the rationale there.
I understand the reasoning behind it. I just through to the community aspect of it. Even the example that you've given, it may not be really beneficial to us to say, hey, I took an SDAB course this weekend, but I think it actually is valuable to the community to hear that council is expending these funds in these ways, and that that would be a benefit to the greater organization, so.
I would also
That's why
note,
I'd like to see it.
As I look at this again, and I think we talked about it briefly, but administratively, but it didn't necessarily make it in there. I think there's also the opportunity to have those reports be very brief written reports that are then just added in the council report section in the agenda, so they could just be read. They don't necessarily have to be given verbally or anything of that nature as well. There's flexibility in how those reports are delivered, so.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Reid.
Yeah, I just wanted to add and echo as well what I've heard. I appreciate the simplicity of it, of the policy, the transparency and accountability. I think it hits all the key buttons in terms of what the public and then what we expect of ourselves. I did do a little research on that National Joint Commission or Council, and thought that was an appropriate source of reference to in terms of being able to move forward, and I like that move. I also like the quarterly reporting. I think anything more current than that, I think, is unnecessary and probably inefficient. And while I support the development and training section of this, I have had experiences in the past where that has been used, perhaps, I don't want to say abused, but certainly used to the extent of the law, and so I'm cautiously concerned about that. One example I would cite is in a previous life on a previous town council I was on, we had a member try to use this kind of approach to complete an MBA program where it was a fact they used the town in some of the case studies, but the reality was that the council decided that it was inappropriate that town or that community should be paying for that person's MBA. So I think I'm just cautiously concerned about that. I'm not suggesting that anybody in this council would abuse that, but I recognize that this is a policy that will go forward to future councils, and so just cautiously concerned about that particular thing. And then to the mayor's point, I think it's only appropriate that if we're provided with taxpayers' funds to attend a conference or to get some additional training and learning, that we have an accountability to report back on that, and I think that just should be a natural and a given. So those would be my only comments.
Thank you. Anything you want to say?
Just wondering about testing some language there, and would this through to the Mayor Janung and others who have interest in the reporting piece, is language around that the obligation to report relevant learnings is on the councillor? Is that language strong enough rather than a may, or they're compelled to, or just curious, testing some language there?
Yeah, thank you. I would go back to are required.
Okay.
Just strong, as in I don't think would have pushback from this side of the room. It's just, and that's why I kind of prefaced my remarks with, like, we're not even following our current policy in some regard. I think most of us do give a report back, and it's kind of already an unwritten, even though it's written, rule, but yeah, I do think it should be a requirement.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I only have one thought on the discussion, and that was with the transferring of budgets between councillors. The one piece of wisdom I see there is that you see it in this group, and I'm sure it happens in every group, where there's certain members that have more time or inclination to travel to conferences, which I do see value in our town being represented at. And we have others that often I fall on the side of where I don't go to as many of the conference things, but I'm certainly appreciative of those that are there and representing our community. I think we need to have somebody there doing just that. So I see wisdom, and I would be happy to, if I were on that side of things, to transfer budget from myself to those people that are doing that, because I see value, frankly. So that's the one piece where I go, I do see wisdom in Councillor McFadden's thought there. I don't know if there's other communities already doing that. I assume they would be. We could just follow their, the way they go about that. I do think it's a useful thing, just as I said, where those that do want to represent us and are doing that, them spending more money, I think is appropriate, frankly. So
maybe as well, if I may, as I just again think about this more now, I'm testing ideas here in the committee of the whole. That's the kind of the purpose here is perhaps there's a middle ground as well, which is to say something like someone can transfer up to a certain portion, because I do think that there is some wisdom in saying, no, this money is we want every member of council to pursue a certain amount of training and development to ensure that they're up to date. And so if we, that's just an idea to just ensure that it's not a, hey, you get all this training and development because you have time and availability, but there's still, in my opinion, a healthy expectation that each member of council pursues a certain amount of that. And so if we were to pursue a transferability, I might suggest something like a maximum of 50% of the allotment or something like that. That's just, again, off the top of my head, but might be worth considering.
Okay,
Just because I had my light on, I do like that, yeah, that works for me. Interested to hear what others think.
sounds good. Councillor McFadden.
Yeah, like my most recent conversation with that, I think, was with Rocky View County on the transferability, and they were like, oh, we just do it. So I don't know. I know there's patterns and models out there. It's not uncommon, but I also do, I actually think it's actually part of the job. And I do agree, it should be reported, and if we can have like a template that, you know, that we would fill out and it would be added to the reporting piece. And we could speak to it verbally if necessary, if we choose, but I do think when you do go on these, to just have that reporting piece is really important, and I think that should also be added to the public record, you know, with the report. So I'm, as somebody who does attend conferences, I think that's more than fair and accountable. But I think also there's the need to be accountable to the fact, I think, that you are expected to continue with training. So that piece should be perhaps noted as well. But and also I do like the idea of just like a cap, like whether it's 50% or 30%, that, yeah, so it could be there. But I think there's tools to get around it. But yeah, overall, I think the amendments and the conversation around this is really taking it to a much more, you know, putting it back on the council member to be transparent and accountable, but also increasing the funding amount allows for people to attend and to represent. So anyway, I think it's, yeah, good steps. I support it.
I think you just a thought that was triggered by your comments, Councillor McFadden, is for some members of our community, minimizing expenses may be their priority, but for others, a really well-educated council member may be their priority. And so the transparency piece would be just as easy for someone to go and see which members of their council are spending time getting educated and learning their role as a priority to. So being able to see both of those things, I think, is a really important part of this policy.
Okay, just me left to speak then. I do agree that we should be able to transfer some of it, not all of it, but some of it to others. And I worry that maybe the mayor will run out because he's representing us at so many different events and relationship building. So I would hate to see the money not be transferred if the need was there.
If I may, just to that point, Councillor Flowers, that budget is specific to the mayor's training and development, which is different than, for example, intergovernmental relations. So the mayor traveling or any member of council traveling to Edmonton for a specific meeting with a minister, that would be accommodated through you know, an intergovernmental budget, not through this training and development budget. So just wanted to note that this is specific to the personal growth and development of council members.
Okay. It was the FCM budget that prompted me to think about that, because I think it's really important that we have someone there, and it's not always cheap to send somebody across the country. So I just wanted to make sure we had enough for that. One thing we didn't talk about, and I don't know if you did administratively, at one point we thought each councillor might be able to have a little budget for whether improvements around town, whether it was a bench that we wanted to put in or a garbage can or whatever it might be through our period of time that we were here. Did you have any discussion about that?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We did, but that is actually still on the table of the budget task force. That's where that conversation is existing right now. And I would say that's a separate conversation from the expense policy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just think it's important not to lose that, because for the time that we're here, it's important that we have some kind of impact. I think that was it. I didn't like the words reasonable parking charges, because I don't know how you define reasonable, and it just seemed a little open to argument. What some people might think is reasonable, others might not.
Thank you. Again, we tried to leave the language pretty open, and what we're thinking here is what's reasonable for one event may not be reasonable for another. For example, there are certain venues where valet parking is just the most reasonable option in terms of accessibility and all those types of things. So we didn't want to strictly prohibit something like valet parking when sometimes it may be the appropriate option. I would also suggest that there are different physical needs for individuals as well, which may impact things like parking costs. And so we didn't want to get, again, prescriptive, and couldn't think of a good way to articulate the variety of needs. And it may not even be any of our current sitting members of council, but some future member of council may have, physical limitations that make parking more or less expensive as part of that. So again, our focus on this is that the transparency would be there, as in people could go look at the end, and if they felt like you, Councillor Flowers, were spending too much on parking, they would be able to address that with you or express that concern. And so the onus is on each member of council as they're making that decision to kind of do that test with themselves as to whether or not they're comfortable with that potential outcome.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense to me. And I do appreciate the accountability that if someone isn't going to the conference at the last minute, that they have to take the responsibility to make sure things get canceled, because it's pretty easy to let those things slide in. But who makes them accountable? Is it the mayor or is it the staff?
Well, I think some of the accountability exists in the expenditure as part of that. What I would suggest is perhaps if there's cancellation fees or those types of things, that they would still show up on their expense reporting as part of it. It would still be an expense they incurred.
Okay, thank you. Overall, I think it's a good move, and appreciate all the work on it. Councillor McFadden, did you have a final?
Yeah, sorry, some other thoughts that have percolated. So, because I was thinking it was kind of like all-in cost. But, I mean, I know we've got the Mid-Cities Mayors, or Mid-City Caucus, Mid-City something in
Summit,
January.
the Mid-Size Cities Mayors Caucus Summit in January.
Right. And so would that come out of this budget? Would it come out of a mid-cities or an intergovernmental budget?
Yeah, so I think that that's a really good example of a distinction I would make. Attending the mayor or our representative attending a regular meeting of mid-sized cities, I would say no. But an event type, this is basically a conference that group is putting on, I would say it would be an appropriate expense for it to come from this fund.
Yeah, so maybe some just clarification on that, because I think the Alberta municipalities they also hold like kind of every quarter they hold different meetings to discuss, like those are open, and I've always said no because I didn't think it fit in my budget. So if we could just get some clarification on what is maybe fitting into a training budget and what's fitting into something more like that would be great. And then I think maybe what also might be useful is maybe a list of conferences and training opportunities that are available. And I know, like, even like, so like if you haven't been involved with FCSS, you might not know that there's, that conference and that they really do have an elected official stream. I don't know how eager I'd be to go to the, finance officers one, but it would just be nice to get a list of the different training opportunities that are out there instead of just maybe the standard ones, just to help different people kind of be aware of what might be out there.
Yeah, thank you. To the second part, absolutely. I think our legislative service team would be happy to start to gather a resource list that we can share with council fairly regularly, in particular when new members of council come on board, that they can say, hey, here's all the opportunities you have to learn about this new exciting job that you are taking on here. Right. To the previous point about the seminars, I think the challenge is if we try to start getting prescriptive or define, it's a never-ending thing and there's a lot of lists. I think we want to try and leave the language at, is this a training and development opportunity, or are you assigned to go there? And with AB Munis as a great example, they have spring training sessions. Usually those are pretty clearly, I think, defined in terms of the activity themselves that would allow for that determination to be made. But I would think if you were to sit on something like a working committee from AB Munis, that would be a separate activity from that as part of it. So I'd have to give that a little bit of thought. I think your point is well made. I think it's going to be a challenge to try to define that too much. And my suggestion would be, let's take this out for a spin for a little while and see how it feels. And if we find or experience any rubs, then we can make some adjustments as necessary.
Yeah, no, and I think this is good. And I think at the end of the day, the biggest challenge is probably not what the budget is. It's the fact that the bulk of this council are part-time and working full-time. And so that to go and attend these things is actually, time away from employed work. And and vacation times with family and weekends with kids and all those things. So there is, not only is there kind of a budget to make these things happen, but there is kind of a limit of which a part-time council can commit to doing these things. So I think that's probably more of the limit of what is going to be able to be attained than perhaps what the budget allows. Just my last little piece on this, when we were talking about reasonable parking charges, I kind of wonder why we have reasonable there at all, or whether it should be in the entire thing, because we would also want reasonable airfare and bus fare and taxi fare. Like, I don't know why we're saying just reasonable parking charges. I think the whole thing should just either all or not.
I certainly agree with that. I think the reason we did that is because there was a specific reference to valet parking, and so we were backing away from something that was already there. That's probably why, but your logic, I think, makes sense there, and I'm certainly comfortable with that. And again, the accountability comes from the reporting and the transparency piece, that if there's issues with that, it will be highlighted through that. So happy to remove that language.
Yeah, so that's my feedback here. Like, overall, again, I just think the strength of it is in the flexibility and the transparency and the public accountability piece. So great steps. Anyway, thank you, Councillor Wilson, for bringing this forward.
Final words from Councillor Wilson.
Yes, I don't mean to belabor the conversation. I just wanted to ensure that on the reporting aspect of this, that whether it's intergovernmental or personal development, it's all reported on the website. So if I'm traveling to a conference that's considered intergovernmental, that'll still be on my councillor expense reporting. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. It will still show your meals, your travel, your accommodations as part of that. It just won't come from that $6,500 allotment.
Thank you for the clarity.
Okay. Did you get all the feedback that you need on this topic, or is there anything outstanding?
Thank you. That was a really great conversation. I feel like we're really close to a nice policy improvement for council and moving in a great direction. So thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you for doing that work. So I guess we're at the end of our business portion, and we need a motion to go in camera. Councillor Wilson moved. All in favor? And we don't adjourn the meeting until we come back. Is that correct? Okay, so we'll take a 10-minute break. And while the feed, 10. I'm the boss today.